Hello, my name is Blaze. I'm 25 and I work as a maintenance technician at a heavy equipment manufacturing plant on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The place is all concrete floors, grinding machines, and the constant smell of oil and metal shavings. I've been there for 2 years now, fixing conveyor belts, hydraulic lines, and whatever else breaks down during the endless shifts. It's not a bad job. It pays enough to cover the rent on my small townhouse in a quiet suburb, keep my old pickup running, and let me tinker with the motorcycle I've been slowly rebuilding in my garage on weekends. Life was straightforward. I'd wake up at 5:30, grab a coffee from the diner down the road, head to the plant for the early shift, come home covered in grease, microwave something for dinner, and crash on the couch with whatever game was on TV. No girlfriend, no big circle of friends. Just me, the quiet, and that half-finished bike in the garage that I dreamed of one day taking on a cross-country ride. Just a backpack and the open road. I liked it that way, or at least that's what I told myself. But the plant wore you down. The machines never stopped, and neither did the pressure. Shifts ran long, overtime was expected, and when something went wrong, fingers pointed fast. I'd been holding it together for months, taking on extra tasks without complaining, staying late to fix problems that weren't even mine. I thought if I just kept my head down and worked harder, things would even out. But they didn't. It built up slowly. Sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all there was. Then came that Friday afternoon. The weekly production meeting in the cramped conference room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A major hydraulic failure had shut down half the line the night before. It wasn't my fault. The seals had been wearing out for weeks and I'd flagged it in reports no one read. But when the plant manager started laying into the team, his eyes landed on me. "Blaze, you're the tech on that section. How did this slip through?" I tried to explain, the logs, the warnings I'd submitted. But he cut me off, voice rising, blaming me in front of everyone. My coworkers shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Even Jasmine, my direct supervisor, stayed quiet. She was 41, sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who commanded respect without raising her voice. She'd always been fair with me, but in that moment, she just looked down at her notes. I felt something snap inside. Not anger exactly, more like exhaustion, deep in my bones. The drive home that evening blurred by, rain starting to fall against the windshield. I sat in my living room until the early hours, the house silent except for the tick of the old wall clock. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop and typed the resignation letter. Simple, professional, no drama. I hit print, signed it, and went to bed with a strange emptiness in my chest. The next morning, I walked into the plant like any other day. Jasmine was in her office, door half open, reviewing schedules on her computer. I knocked lightly, stepped in, and placed the letter on her desk. She picked it up, read it slowly. Her expression didn't change much, just a slight tightening around her eyes. She looked up at me for a long moment. "You're sure about this?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think it's time." She folded the letter once, set it aside. "Okay, I'll process it." That was it. No argument, no questions. I turned and walked out, feeling a mix of relief and something heavier I couldn't name. The rest of the shift dragged, but I finished my tasks, handed over my notes to the guy who'd cover my section, and left for good. 3 days later, I was trying to adjust to the sudden quiet. No alarm at 5:30, no rush to the plant. I'd spent the time cleaning the garage, working on the bike, applying for a few remote jobs online. It felt like freedom, but also like drifting. That evening, around 8:17 p.m., the rain had picked up, drumming hard against the roof. I was on the couch scrolling through my phone when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Wiping my hands on my jeans, I opened the door. And there she was. Jasmine stood on the porch, her coat soaked through, dark hair plastered to her forehead, holding a thin folder against her chest like a shield. The porch light caught the raindrops on her lashes. She looked colder than I'd ever seen her, but her eyes were steady. "I accept your resignation," she said, voice low and a little hoarse from the chill. "But I don't accept you disappearing from my life." I just stood there, frozen in the doorway. Everything inside me stopped. The rain, the cold night air, the weight of the past 2 years. It all faded as I looked at her, wondering what the hell was happening, and why my heart was suddenly pounding like it hadn't in years. Looking back, it all started about 6 months before I handed in that letter. I'd just gone through a breakup that hit me harder than I let on. Her name was Katie. We'd been together since community college, on and off for 4 years. She wanted more, marriage talk, kids eventually, a house with a yard. I wasn't there yet. I was still figuring out how to pay off my loans and keep my head above water at the plant. One night she packed her things while I was on a late shift, left a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't wait anymore." Just like that. No big fight, no screaming. She was gone by morning. The weeks after were rough. I'd show up to work on autopilot, eyes burning from lack of sleep, messing up small things I usually nailed without thinking. I'd linger in the break room longer than I should, staring at my phone like it might ring with an apology that never came. I didn't talk about it. Not to the guys on the floor, not to anyone. But Jasmine noticed. She was my shift supervisor, always professional, always calm under pressure. 41, with short dark hair she kept pulled back, sharp green eyes that missed nothing, and this quiet authority that made even the oldest techs listen when she spoke. She'd been at the plant longer than most, worked her way up from the floor despite the guys who doubted a woman could handle it. I respected her. Everyone did. But I never thought she paid any special attention to me. Then one afternoon she pulled me aside after a shift change. "Blaze, your numbers are slipping. Everything all right?" Her voice was low, no judgment. I shrugged it off. "Just tired, it'll pass." And she nodded. Didn't push. But the next day my schedule changed. No more mandatory overtime on my section. A couple of easier shifts thrown in. She never said it was because of me, but I knew. It started with texts, simple ones slipped in between work updates. "Don't stay late tonight. Go home and rest. You looked worn out this morning. Take it easy. Everything okay today?" At first I thought it was just her being a good supervisor, keeping an eye on her team. I'd reply with short thanks, nothing more. But they kept coming, and slowly they stopped feeling like orders. One night, around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. I was in the garage, covered in grease, wrench in hand, trying to get the carburetor right on that old Harley frame I'd picked up cheap. The call was from her. Not a text this time. I wiped my hands and answered. Hey, Jasmine. Something wrong at the plant?" A pause, then her voice, softer than at work. "No, nothing like that. I just saw you left your safety glasses in the break room again. Figured I'd remind you before tomorrow." I laughed a little, the first real one in weeks. "Thanks, I'll grab 'em." Another pause, then, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. I don't know why, but I opened up. Told her about Katie leaving, how empty the house felt, how I threw myself into the bike because it was something I could fix when everything else felt broken. She listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't give advice. Just let me talk until the words ran out. When I finished, she said quietly, "That sounds heavy. I'm sorry you're carrying it alone." We hung up soon after, but something shifted that night. The calls became a thing. Not every day, but often enough. Late, when the plant was quiet and the world felt smaller. She'd tell me about growing up in a rough part of town, single mom raising her after her dad walked out. How she'd cared for her mother through years of illness, working double shifts to pay bills. How she got into this field because she was good with machines but had to fight twice as hard because some guys still saw her as out of place. They'd question every call I made, she'd say, voice steady but tired. But I learned to tune it out, build my own way. I'd tell her about the bike, how I'd scavenged parts from junkyards, how getting it running felt like proof I could still make something work. About wanting to ride it west one day, no plan, just highways and small towns and whatever came next. Those calls stretched longer, an hour, sometimes two. Her voice through the phone became this steady thing in the dark, cutting through the noise in my head. I'd lie on the couch afterward, staring at the ceiling, feeling less alone. And I started wondering if she felt it too, the way talking to me quieted whatever storm she carried. We never named it, never crossed any lines. She was still my boss. I was still the tech trying to hold it together. But in those late-night conversations, something grew. Quiet, slow, undeniable. Understanding. The kind that sneaks up on you through small things. Shared silences, a laugh at the right moment, knowing someone sees you when you're not even trying to be seen. By the time the merger hit and everything started falling apart at work, those calls were the only thing keeping me steady. But I didn't realize how much they meant to her, too. Not until much later. The merger came like a storm no one saw coming. One day, everything was running as usual. The next, we were told the plant was being absorbed by a bigger corporation out of Cleveland. New protocols, new targets, new management breathing down our necks. Efficiency this, productivity that. They brought in fresh systems, computerized maintenance logs I'd never been trained on, tighter deadlines, and a whole new section of machinery dumped on my plate without so much as a walkthrough. I tried to keep up, I really did. I'd stay after my shift, poring over manuals under the harsh shop lights, coffee going cold beside me. But the learning curve was brutal. Parts I'd never touched before, sensors that failed in ways the old ones never did. I'd fix one issue and two more would pop up. The overtime piled on. 10-hour days turned into 12, 14. Sleep became this rare thing I'd catch in snatches, waking up with grease still under my nails and a knot in my stomach. Mistakes started slipping in. Small at first, a calibration off by a fraction, a line I forgot to bleed properly, then bigger. One night, a conveyor jammed because I missed a warning light in the new dashboard. Production stopped for 3 hours. The next morning, the new plant manager called a huddle on the floor, voice booming over the hum of machines restarting. "Who's responsible for this section?" Eyes turned to me. I stepped forward, explained what happened, took the blame. He didn't yell, not exactly. Worse, he dissected it in front of everyone, questioning my methods, my attention to detail. "We're not running a hobby shop here." My face burned. I caught Jasmine's glance from across the group. She looked away quickly, jaw tight, but said nothing. I knew she was under the same pressure, maybe more. Defending me could have cost her. That night I drove home in silence, rain streaking the windshield again. The house felt colder than usual. I sat at the kitchen table until the clock hit 2 a.m., staring at the blank screen of my laptop. The exhaustion wasn't just physical anymore. It was this heavy weight pressing on my chest, making every breath feel labored. I kept thinking about those late calls with Jasmine, how they'd tapered off in the chaos of the merger. No more texts checking if I was okay. No more quiet voices in the dark. Just work, just survival. I opened a new document and started typing. The words came slow at first, then faster. Professional, concise. Explaining that I was resigning effective immediately, thanking them for the opportunity, wishing the team well. No bitterness, no details about the burnout. I read it over twice, hands shaking slightly from too much coffee and too little sleep. Then I printed it, signed at the bottom, folded it neat. Morning came gray and damp. I walked into the plant like any other day, badge scanning me through the gate. Jasmine was in her office, door ajar, going over the new reports with a furrowed brow. I knocked once, stepped in. The air smelled like her coffee, strong, black, no sugar. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face when she saw the envelope in my hand. "What's this?" I placed it on her desk. "My resignation." She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the lines. The room was quiet except for the distant clang of machinery outside. When she finished, she set it down carefully, leaned back in her chair. For a long moment, she just looked at me. Really looked. I saw the tiredness in her eyes, too, the faint lines that hadn't been as deep before the merger. "You're sure?" I nodded. My throat felt tight. "I can't keep up anymore. It's not the job, it's me. I'm burned out." She exhaled slowly, fingers drumming once on the desk. "I won't try to talk you out of it if that's what you need. No one should stay when they're this exhausted." A pause, her voice softening just a fraction. "But don't ever think you're not capable, Blaze. You're one of the best we've got. You're just shouldering more than anyone should have to alone." Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to say something about the pressure, the mistakes, how her silence in that meeting had stung, but I just nodded again. "Thanks. For everything." I turned to go, feeling the weight lift a little and settle heavier at the same time. The rest of the day blurred. Clearing out my locker, handing off tools, saying awkward goodbyes to guys who'd become familiar faces. No one asked why, not really. They just clapped me on the shoulder and wished me luck. Driving home that final time, I kept waiting for my phone to buzz. A text from her, maybe. Something. Anything. But it stayed silent. Days passed in a strange limbo, no alarm, no rush, just me in the garage and that unfinished bike. I told myself it was for the best. Clean break. She'd accepted it professionally, like always, but deep down in the quiet hours when the house felt too empty, I wondered if those late-night calls had meant as much to her as they had to me. Or if, like everything else lately, they'd just faded under the strain. 3 days dragged by in a haze. The house felt too quiet without the routine of the alarm, the drive, the hum of the plant. I filled the time the only way I knew how. Out in the garage, sleeves rolled up, radio low, wrenching on the bike. The rain hadn't let up much. It tapped steadily on the tin roof like it was trying to remind me of something. I'd applied for a couple of remote tech positions. Nothing exciting, but something that might let me breathe. Nights were the worst. I'd sit on the couch with a beer going warm in my hand, scrolling through old photos on my phone, wondering if I'd made the right call or just run away. Then came that evening. The rain had turned heavier, wind whipping the trees outside. I was in the kitchen heating up leftover pizza when the doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, figured it was a delivery mix-up or maybe one of the neighbors complaining about the garage light I'd left on. I opened the door without thinking. Jasmine was there. She looked smaller somehow, huddled under the porch light in her dark wool coat, soaked through despite the short overhang. Water dripped from the ends of her hair, running down her face in thin streams. In her hands, pressed against her chest to keep it dry, was a slim folder. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look composed. She looked vulnerable, cold, afraid. "Blaze," she said, voice rough like she'd been out in the weather too long. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word, the chill rushing in with her. She brushed past, leaving wet footprints on the entry mat. I closed the door, the click loud in the sudden quiet. She stood there a moment, dripping onto the floor, then held out the folder. "This is for you." I took it, confused. Inside was a printed recommendation letter, detailed, glowing, addressed to a remote maintenance position at a smaller firm outside Philly. Better pay, flexible hours, the kind of job that would let someone actually have a life outside work. My name was all over it, her signature at the bottom. "You could have emailed this," I said, voice quieter than I meant, "or mailed it. Why drive out here in this?" She looked down at the puddle forming at her feet, then back up at me. Her hands were trembling, not just from the cold, I realized. She hugged her arms around herself. Because an email felt too easy. Too final. A pause, her breath shaky. I didn't want it to be final. I set the folder on the side table, not sure what to say. The kitchen light cast soft shadows across her face, highlighting the faint lines around her eyes, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding something back. "Jasmine." "I know," she cut in softly. "I know I should have said something sooner, at the plant when you handed in the letter, or before that when everything was piling up. But I was scared. Scared of overstepping, scared of what it might mean." She took a small step closer, water still dripping from her coat. Those late calls, they weren't just me checking on an employee. They were the only time in my day when I felt like I could breathe. Hearing your voice, listening to you talk about that bike, about wanting to hit the road, it made everything else fade. For a little while, I wasn't just the supervisor holding it all together. I was just me. Her words hung there, heavy. I thought back to those nights, her quiet laugh when I'd describe some junkyard find, the way she'd share stories about her mom, about fighting her way up in a world that didn't always want her there. How I'd hang up feeling less hollow. "I didn't realize," I said finally. "I thought it was one-sided. That you were just being kind." She shook her head, a small, sad smile. "It wasn't kindness, not all of it. I looked forward to those calls more than I should have. And when you resigned, I told myself to let you go, that you needed space, a clean break. But these past 3 days," her voice cracked just a little. "I've been replaying every conversation, wondering if I'd missed my chance. If I'd waited too long to say that I don't just care about how well you fix machines. I care about you, The real you. The one who stays late not for overtime, but because you hate leaving something broken. The room felt warmer suddenly, despite the rain lashing the windows. I could hear her breathing, unsteady. See the way she was waiting, braced for whatever came next. I was afraid too, I admitted. Afraid of reading into it. You were my boss, and older, and everything I'm not, strong, put together. She let out a soft huff, almost a laugh. Put together? Blaze, I've been alone for years. Divorced before 35, no kids, just work. I got good at hiding the lonely parts. But you saw through it somehow, without even trying. We stood there, the space between us shrinking without either of us moving. The rain outside softened to a steady patter. I wanted to reach out to brush the water from her cheek, but I held back, letting the moment stretch. I didn't come here expecting anything, she said quietly. I just couldn't let you vanish without knowing. Without telling you that if I lose you from my life now, it'll hurt more than any merger or deadline ever could. Her confession settled over me like the warmth from the kitchen bleeding into the hall. All those unspoken things, the glances at work, the way her texts had become lifelines, they weren't in my head. They were real. I didn't have words yet. But in that dim threshold light, with the storm raging outside and her standing there soaked and honest, I knew this was the moment everything changed. Not with fireworks, just truth. Raw, late, but finally spoken. I didn't say anything at first. The words she'd just laid out there hung in the air like the steam rising from the coffee maker in the kitchen. Jasmine stood in the entryway, coat still dripping, eyes searching mine for some kind of answer. I could see the fear in them. The kind that comes from putting yourself out there after years of keeping everything locked down. Come in, I said finally, voice low. You're freezing. She nodded, slipped off her soaked coat and hung it on the hook by the door like she'd done it before. I led her into the living room, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet the only sound. The space was simple. Worn couch, a couple of shelves with tools and old bike magazines, the faint smell of oil that never quite left my clothes. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped in her lap, while I went to the kitchen and poured 2 mugs of coffee. Black for her, a little sugar in mine. I handed her one, our fingers brushing for a second. She wrapped both hands around it like she needed the warmth more than the drink. We sat across from each other, the rain a steady murmur outside. No rush to fill the silence. It felt different now, not the professional distance of the plant, not even the easy flow of those late calls. This was raw. Real. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly, staring into her mug. Love, or whatever this is. I've spent so long just working, building walls. After the divorce, after everything with my mom, it was easier that way, safer. She looked up at me, eyes soft in the lamplight. But with you, those calls, they chipped away at it. Your voice on the other end made the days bearable. Made me remember I was more than just the job. I set my mug down, leaned forward a little. I felt the same. Those nights, talking about nothing and everything, it was the only time I didn't feel like I was drowning. You saw me, Jasmine. Not the tech guy fixing problems, not the one holding it together, just me. She smiled faintly, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes yet. I miss that. Miss you. Even when you were right there at the plant every day. The words settled deep. I reached out slow and took her hand. It was cold from the rain, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled around mine, holding on like it was the most natural thing. We didn't kiss, not then. Didn't need to rush into labels or promises. We just sat there, hands linked, the warmth spreading slow between us, talking in low voices about small things at first, the bike in the garage, how I'd finally got the engine turning over smooth last week. Then deeper. Her fears about starting over at her age, feeling like she'd missed her chance at something real. My own doubts, the way the breakup with Katie had left me wary of letting anyone close again. But in that quiet room, with the lamp casting golden light and the rain easing outside, it felt like healing. Like the exhaustion we'd both carried was finally lifting, shared between us instead of alone. 2 months later, things had shifted in ways I never pictured. I took the remote job she'd recommended. Troubleshooting systems from home, better pay, hours that actually ended. No more grinding shifts, no more feeling like a cog wearing down. The extra time let me finish the bike. A '78 Harley, black and chrome, rumbling like it had been waiting for this. Jasmine and I started spending weekends on it. She'd show up Saturday mornings, jeans and a leather jacket I'd lent her that first ride, hair tied back, eyes brighter than I'd seen at the plant. We'd head out on the back roads around Pittsburgh, twisting through fall-colored hills, stopping at little diners for coffee and pie, talking about everything we'd held back before. She wasn't the hard-edged supervisor anymore, laughing when the wind whipped her hair free, leaning into the curves with me, her arms around my waist like it was where they belonged. And I wasn't the burned-out tech just getting by. With her, I felt steady, seen. We didn't call it anything big, no talks of moving in, no rings or future plans laid out, just us choosing each other in the quiet ways. Her texting to check if I'd eaten on busy days, me showing up with takeout when I knew her shifts ran long. Riding those roads, wind in our faces, past small towns and open fields, sharing stories from before we met. Sometimes we'd pull over at a lookout, sit on the bike with the engine ticking cool and just be. Her head on my shoulder, my arm around her. No need for words. We'd both been alone for so long, guarding ourselves. But somehow we'd stepped past that fear. Together. Love doesn't always announce itself loud. It doesn't need names or timelines. Sometimes it's just someone showing up in the rain, refusing to let you disappear. Someone whose hand fits yours like it's always belonged there. And for us, in those quiet moments on the road, or in my living room with coffee going cold, that was enough. More than enough.